Look at this wall. It looks perfect on the day it was painted. The color was beautiful, the finishing was smooth. Everyone was happy, but just a few weeks later, the paint started peeling. Now, here is the surprising part. The paint probably wasn't the real problem. Today, we are going to uncover what really happened. In today's video, we are going to investigate the real reason paint fails. You will discover what happens inside the wall, why professional paint really fail, and why understanding the problem is far more important than simply changing your paint formula. By the end of this lesson, you will begin thinking like a professional paint manufacturer. If you have ever asked yourself, why does my paint keep peeling? This lesson could completely change the way you manufacture paint. Not because you will memorize more chemical, but because you will understand the system behind successful coating. Once you understand the real cause, you will stop guessing and start solving problem like a fact. 3. Welcome to Glina Paint Education. This channel is for paint manufacturers, paint entrepreneurs, contractors, dealers of different types of paint, and anyone who wants to build a profitable paint manufacturing business. Here, paint manufacturing is more than mixing paint. We teach industrial paint production system, factory thinking, and professional manufacturing methods that help you build products people trust. And of course, you stop guessing, you build your system rightfully, and think like a paint factory. A while ago, one of my students called me. He sounded frustrated. Coach Glina, my customer are complaining. The paint keeps peeling. The first thing he did was blame the paint. Yes, it's normal. Then he blamed the binder. After that, he blamed the workers. He even thought the supplier had sold him fake chemical. So I asked him a simple question. Did you check the wall before painting? There was silence from him because no one had checked the wall. That one question changed everything. The problem wasn't hiding inside the bucket, it was already waiting on the wall. And that's the differences between guessing and factory thinking. Professional manufacturers don't start by asking, what chemical should I add? They start by asking, what is the real problem? Let's investigate this together. Imagine pouring water into a dry sponge. What happened? The sponge immediately absorbed it. Now imagine painting directly onto fresh cement. Something very similar happens. Many cement walls contain thousands of tiny holes that you cannot see with your eyes. Those tiny holes behave like immature sponge. Instead of allowing the paint to form a strong protective layers, the wall starts pulling water out of the paint too quickly before the paint has enough time to build strength. The paint flames becomes weak. Its grips on the wall becomes weaker. Weeks later, sometimes months later, the paint begins to peel. You'll start noticing something important. Nothing magical happened. The wall simply absorbed what the paint needed to form a strong bond. Professional manufacturers understand this. That is why they don't just manufacture paint, they design complete coating system. This is one of the biggest differences between beginners and professional paint manufacturer. You see, beginners see peeling of paint and immediately they search for another formula. Why professional pause? They investigate, they ask, what caused this failure? Because changing the paint doesn't always solve the problem. Sometimes the real problem happened long before the paint was mixed. This is what I call factory thinking. Every production failure has a cause, every cause has a solution, and every solution begins with understanding the system. You see, good paint doesn't happen by accident, it happens by design. So now we know something important. Paint doesn't always peel because the paint is poor quality. But that raises an even bigger question. What exactly happens inside the paint while it is drying? Why does one wall hold paint for years while another starts peeling after only a few weeks? And what role does primer really play? To answer those questions, we need to look deeper, not just at the wall, but at the science behind adhesion system. Because once you understand that, you will never look at paint the same way again. Now, let's zoom even closer, not with our eyes, but with our understanding. Imagine the surface of a cement wall from a distance. It looks smooth. But if we could shrink ourselves thousands of times, we would discover something completely different. The wall isn't really smooth. It is filled with millions of tiny holes, tiny tunnels. Think of it like a dry sponge. When you pour water into a sponge, it immediately pulls the water inside. A fresh cement wall behaves in almost the same way. When your paint touches the wall immediately starts pulling water away from the paint, and that's where the story begins. Not inside the bucket, but inside the wall. Now, let's look inside the paint itself. Many people think paint is just white or colored liquid, but paint is actually a team. Every chemical has a job. Imagine building a house. You need bricks, you need cement, you need water, you need workers. Paint works the same way. Inside every bucket, water carries everything. Pigment gives color, fillers build the body, and the binder acts like glue. If one important member of the team cannot do its job, the whole system becomes weaker. That is why professional manufacturers don't just mix chemical, they build a paint production system. Every chemical works together. Now let's meet the most important member of the team, the binder. Think about laying floor tiles. Without tiles adhesion, the tiles won't stay on the floor. The binder does almost the same job. It holds every paint particles together. Then it sticks the paint to the wall. That is why I like to call it the invisible glue. But here is something many beginners don't know. The binder needs time. It needs enough water to form a strong flame. If the wall steals that water too quickly, the binder never finishes its job. The paint may look dry, but it hasn't formed a strong bond. Weeks later, the peelings begin. Imagine trying to bake bread. You put the dough into the oven, but after only 2 minutes, someone remove it. Will the bread be ready? Of course not. It needs more time. Paint behaves in similar way. The binder needs enough moisture to complete its works. When the wall absorbs the water too quickly, the binder is interrupted. The protective flame becomes weak. The grip becomes weaker. Eventually, the paint loses its connection to the wall. That is called adhesion failure. Not because the paint was bad, but because the system failed. This is why I always say professional manufacturers don't chase better chemical first. I'm not saying you don't need to get good chemicals. I'm simply saying that as a professional manufacturer, they first understand the production failure, then they build the right system. This is one of the biggest differences between beginners and professional paint manufacturers or paint producers. A beginner sees peeling paint and asks, What chemical should I buy? A professional paint manufacturer asks, why did the system fail? That one question changes everything. It changes the way you inspect wall, it changes the way you produce paint, and it changes the way customers experiences your product, because factory thinking is not about memorizing formula. It is about understanding how every part of the paint performances chain works together. When you understand the system, you stop reacting to problem, you start preventing them, and prevention is what separates professional manufacturers from everyone else. Now, we know why the paint struggle. The wall is pulling water away too quickly. The binder cannot finish its job. So, how do professional manufacturers solve this problem? They don't fight the wall, they prepare the wall. This is where primer becomes one of the most important products in a production costing system. Think about painting on a paper. If the paper keeps soaking up your paint, the colors become dull. Now imagine putting a thin protective layer on the paper first. Suddenly, the paint stays where it should. The color become richer, the finishes become smoother. A wall primer works in a very similar way. It prepares the surface before the decorative paint arrives. Instead of allowing the wall to steal water from the paint, the primer begins controlling that absorption. Professional manufacturers don't see primer as another bucket of paint. They see it as the foundation of the entire coating system. This is factory thinking. Now, let's compare two walls. Wall A, no primer. Wall B, professional primer. Both receive the same paint, the same roller, the same painter, the same weather, but after several weeks, the result looks completely different. Wall A begins showing early signs of failure, and the paint starts loses its grip. Wall B remains smooth, the paint holds firmly. What changed? Not the paint, not the color, not the painter. The system changed. Professional manufacturer understands something very important. Small changes underneath the surfaces create big difference on the surface. That is why successful factories spend just as much time preparing the surface as they do manufacturing the paint. So, how do you know when a wall needs primer? Here are five simple signs. Number one, the wall is fresh cemented. Fresh cemented absorb water quickly. Number two, the surface feel dusty. Loses dust prevents strong adhesion. Number three, the wall has never been painted before. Number four, the old paint has been scraped away. And number five, the surface absorbs water almost immediately when you splashes it. If you notice this sign, don't ignore them. Professional manufacturers see them as warning sign. Remember, finding the real problem is always the first step. Let's look at the mistake that keep causing paint failure. Mistake number one, adding more binder without understanding the real problem. Mistake number two, painting directly onto dusty wall. Mistake number three, skipping priming to save money. Mistake number four, ignoring surface preparation. And mistake number five, trying to solve every problem by changing the paint formula. Professional manufacturers don't solve problem by guessing. They investigate first, like I said, then they improve the entire paint production system, because a stronger system always beats random changes. By now, you have probably noticed something. Professional manufacturers don't begin with the paint. They begin with understanding, they inspect, they test, they prepare, and then they produce. That is why quality isn't created at the end of the production. Quality begins before the first chemical is mixed. Today, you have discovered the real reason paint peels. Not because the paint is always poor, but because the coating system wasn't complete. And that brings us to the next question. If primer is the foundation of every successful coating system, what makes a professional wall primer? What chemical does it contain? How do factories produce it? And why does one primer perform better than another? Let's build that answer together. Now, the picture is complete. Your paint wasn't fighting against bad luck, it was fighting against an unfinished system. Professional manufacturers know something many beginners never learn. Paint is only one part of the coating system. The wall matters, the surface preparation matters, the primer matters, and the application matters. When one part becomes weak, the entire system becomes weak. Imagine riding a bicycle with one flat tire. The bicycle may be expensive, but it still won't perform properly. Paint works the same way. Professional manufacturers don't try to build strong paint first. They build a strong system. That is why I always say good paint starts with good thinking. Stop guessing. Build system and think like a factory. Let's leave the chemistry for a moment and talk about business. You see, customers don't know how much binder you use. They don't know what thickener you bought. They don't know, or rather, they don't even know your production process. They only know one thing. Did the paint last? If it lasts, they trust you. If they trust you, they recommend you. If they recommend you, your business grow. That is why quality is one of the best marketing strategy in the paint industry. Every bucket you sell is advertising your next bucket. Quality creates trust and trust creates profit. Today's video wasn't really about peeling paint. It was about learning a new way to think. Here at Glina Paint Education, we teach every lesson using three simple ideas. First, find the real problem. Never guess. Always understand the cause. Second, think like a factory. Every chemical has a job. Every process has a reason. Every product follow a system. Third, build a better paint. Good paint doesn't happen by luck. It happens because you understand the chemistry. Production, quality control, and factory thinking. That's what separates a paint mixer from a paint manufacturer. If you're serious about becoming a better paint manufacturer, you are in the right place. Every week, we'll solve another real paint manufacturing problem together. One video, one product, one system at a time. Whether you are producing from a small room or building your dream factory, you are welcome here. Let's keep learning, let's keep improving, and let's build better paint together. My goal is not just to teach you how to mix paint. My goal is to help you build a profitable paint manufacturing business. That is why every video teaches you more than chemistry. It teaches you system, factory thinking, control quality, business growth, and professional manufacturing. If that's the future you want, keep following this channel. And when you are ready to go beyond individual product, the PMB course will help you build the complete manufacturing and business system. Today, we discover why paint peel. Now, we know the real problem. The next step is learning the professional solution. In our next video, we will produce a professional 20 liters wall primer using factory thinking. You will learn a professional working formula, why every chemical is used, the correct production order, common mistakes to avoid, troubleshooting, quality control, factory insight that helps you produce more consistent results, because understanding the problem is the only first step. Now it is time to build the solution. Remember, good paint starts with good thinking. Find the real problem, think like a factory, build better paint. Paint manufacturing is more than mixing chemical. I always say that. It's built products people trust and business that grow. Stop guessing, build system, think like a factory, and I'll see you in the next class.